Hello, friends, and welcome back to another episode of the Concussion Nerds podcast. I'm really excited to share some stories with you today and some thoughts on something people call their concussion anniversaries. I had a great conversation with someone about this today, so we're going to dive into that. But first, we've been working on so many things and still are behind the scenes here. And today, we are sharing the first thing that we are bringing to life in 2025. And that is a half-day workshop specifically for clinicians, physical therapists, acupuncturists, chiropractors, occupational therapists, basically healthcare professionals who are ready to bring clarity and confidence to your concussion assessments and treatments, right? It is designed for you so that you understand how to create change faster and get more meaningful outcomes and change for your clients sooner. So we know that I have my 6-month clinical mentorship program, which is, I'm biased, but it's fantastic. But I realize that you might not be ready for that yet, and that's okay. But I wanted to give you something and create something for you that I know if you do it, and if you implement what we teach, because it's a piece of what we teach in Nerds, that you will already be able to have greater impact with your clients. And so this workshop, we're going to teach it live on January 24th. You'll have lifetime access to the replay. It's a half-day workshop. It's for physical therapists, acupuncturists, chiropractors, occupational therapists, athletic therapists, healthcare professionals who work with individuals on a concussion journey. And we're calling it Rethink Rehab, Simplify Complex Concussion Cases with Confidence. Now, we're going to go through 3 major things in this half-day workshop. I am going to teach you the Concussion Nerds framework. Because part of the challenge I think that we see out there is you guys have so much information, but it's taught to us in a very segmented approach, and we don't know how to bridge it all together and look at it through a more integrated, holistic lens. So we're going to go through the Concussion Nerds framework, and you're going to learn how to systematically filter your assessment data using our integrated science approach to confidently pinpoint where to start and create faster and smarter change for your clients. We're also going to talk about the complex client, because we know that up to 50% of individuals do not recover in that first month, and they move into a more persistent stage. So when we're talking about the complex client, we are going to learn how to embrace that complexity with confidence. We're going to talk about using a holistic approach, and you'll discover how to create that meaningful change for clients that have been stuck and how to collaborate with teams for best outcomes. And the other pillar here we're going to talk about is now filling your caseloads. We're going to use our Concussion Nerds SNS framework, so a little bit of a different framework, to learn how to take simple, meaningful actions to attract and build a thriving concussion caseload. So you can stop guessing and start questioning. And you can just start using simple, proven strategies that connect you with the clients who need your expertise. So really, this workshop is not about throwing out what you already do. It's about supercharging what you already have and giving you a new way of thinking and some new tools to really amp it up a little bit. So by the end of the session, by the end of our half-day workshop, you'll have actionable tools and a clear framework to elevate your concussion practice, deliver faster results, and feel confident already in starting to work with those more complex cases. So here's the kicker. For December only, we are discounting the cost and the investment of what this workshop will be. A half-day workshop live with me, lifetime access to the replay. You can register anytime this month for a special price. Click on the link below this in these show notes and see what that is. And I would love for you to join us. Again, this is one of those things that we are kicking off in 2025. I'm so excited to start to do it. I know it's going to be a tool that if you're just looking for that next piece, but you're not ready to dive into Nerds yet, it is going to be amazing to support you in continuing to grow and move forward in your practice. So that is that. I just wanted to get that out there first and get that, I've been holding that one in. I want to talk about, well, this is going to be a hodgepodge episode, you guys. I hope that's okay. This is definitely going to be a hodgepodge episode because I also want to share a story. We are constantly at Symphony in my clinic. We're looking at what does our client need? And do we have the tools, the tech, the whatever we need to truly make the most change in this client as possible? Or is there the opportunity to get something simple or switch something up a little bit to create a new experience for neuroplasticity and change. And so we have a lovely client in the clinic who, if you've heard me talk before about when we're working with individuals with autonomic dysfunction, particularly individuals with POTS or with dysautonomia that truly does impact their heart rate, and that if someone is, when they're in sitting or when they're in standing, their heart rate is pushing over those 120 beats per minute, you don't necessarily want to treat them in that position because they're already working so hard just to posturally be there, right? When that's a driving piece, we want to work them in, we want to rehab them and challenge their other systems in a position prior to where that happens. So that might mean working with somebody in supine. That might mean working with someone at a 45-degree angle, right? There's just these different factors that you get to link into play. Well, we have a client at the clinic right now, lovely individual. This is part of what goes into consideration with building this person's treatment plan, is that when they are in sitting, their heart rate is pushing 100 beats per minute. And so part of what their rehab needs to include is some otolithic stimulation. I'm not going to go into the full kind of assessment and piece of it, but part of what we want to do for this individual is some linear translation work. And we were trying to think of what we might use to create a safe, comfortable, stable way to linearly translate this individual supine. And I can't remember how we started to think about this, but do you know how this is literally how I went through the process. I was sitting there, we're chatting, we're like, okay, how can we do this? And we're working through a bunch of other things that we could do to stimulate this person's system. And I said, oh my goodness, you know how mechanics have those things that they lay on, that they like wheel to move underneath a car? This was my description, you guys. And everyone was like, oh yeah, for sure. We should try to find one of those, because if we could do that, the person could be supine. They'd be laying there. We could give them a target to look at and we could linearly translate them. It's called a creeper, I discovered, by the way. It's called a creeper. And so Dr. Rachel Parker, who is part of our team here at Symphony, and I decided to go on a little field trip. And so after a full clinical day, we went to Canadian Tire and we went to their automotive section. And we had no idea what aisle this thing was going to. We didn't even really know what it was called up to this point. We learned when we were at Canadian Tire that it was called a creeper. And so we're walking up and down the aisles. And so literally as I start to ask an individual that works there and sharing my description that I shared with you, Rachel found it on the shelf. So this man is looking at Rachel and I, and we pull this creeper off the shelf, and he's asking us what we're using it for. He had no idea what we were talking about. But his response to us, you sound like two very smart ladies. I wish you all the best. But here's what we did. There was 3 of them. We ended up getting none of them, but we tested them all out. So we're in the middle of the Canadian Tire aisle and we pull it out and Rachel lays on it and I like push her down the aisle and we realize, well, this doesn't go straight. Like we cannot control the direction this thing is going. This is not going to work very well. So we put that one back. There was 2 other ones. The boxes happened to already be open. So clearly someone has already opened these boxes to pull the thing out to look at the quality of it. So we pull this thing out and it, no, was not going to be a no. Same thing. We pull this other one out. It's another no. But the hilarious thing is as we're standing there, literally trying to wheel Rachel up the aisle and then talking about how this could work or couldn't work, another lovely couple came down and educated us on creepers and how the really good ones actually then also lift up so you have a bit of a seat as well. It was quite comical. The purpose of this story, as long as a tangent as it is you don't always have to have fancy equipment to have change. Now, granted, we did not buy a creeper that day because we were not satisfied with any of the ones that we tried. We couldn't control the direction. They were a bit wonky. The other ones looked way too flimsy. We did not buy a creeper. So we brainstormed some other ways to work with this client. But things don't always have to be expensive. But sometimes you get to be really creative and think outside the box. And so this is why, especially when I'm educating and when I'm mentoring, this is why I don't necessarily give you a stack of here's your vestibular exercises, or here's your cervical exercises, or Here's the exercises to integrate your eyes and your head together. It's why I don't necessarily give you that. Because what I really want is to inspire you to use your creativity and use that clinical reasoning. And then you have a community that you can come to then say, hey guys, we're working on otolith. Like, I need some ideas. Help me out. Right. Then that's totally fine. But my goal when I educate and when I mentor is to help you and inspire you by truly understanding the purpose of the system or systems you're trying to rehab and integrate. So then you can think of these creative, non-normal, I don't know if anyone's ever bought an automotive creeper to treat the vestibular system. I'm not giving up on this, by the way. But when you understand what you're trying to stimulate and why you're trying to achieve it, then you can start to think outside the box of tools and options to get there, right? It's why I say sometimes my favorite stimulant, my favorite tools are my Post-it notes or my like shiny medallion things that a client gave me as a gift, right? Or going to the dollar store and finding different types of things to use as fixation targets because it's much more cost effective than ordering different fixation sticks from some of our suppliers, right? So you get to have fun with it. You get to be creative with it. It's a fun way to come together and brainstorm as a team as well, which is how we got to the creeper idea. But I wanted to share that story a little bit too, because it's just a fun one, right? And that's also where surrounding yourselves with people who share your passion and want to make change and are a little bit nerdy can really come into play and be a great combination. Okay. I want to talk about this concept of your concussion anniversary. And it's because it came up today and I had a really amazing conversation with someone via Instagram about this topic. And I'm going to share, in the beginning, I didn't love the idea of it. And I didn't love the idea of it for a couple different reasons. Because when it was first introduced to me, not by this person, it's been introduced to me years ago, but when it was first introduced to me, it was always brought up in a way that almost kept the person stuck. Because they would look at that anniversary of that date and they would acknowledge everything they were still struggling with and what that date that their life had changed and been taken away from them and the date they lost everything. And, there's different ways to look at anniversary dates. And so if you are someone that acknowledges your concussion anniversary or concussiversary, let's say that, concussiversary, and that is the way that you are looking at it, I'm going to be really blunt and say that is doing absolutely nothing to serve you. Nothing. Now, if you are using that date as almost like a yearly reflection point, right? So we all know that I am a huge fan of giving yourself pause and giving yourself space to reflect on how far you've come, to acknowledge the trials, the triumphs, the struggles, the successes, how you showed up in your life. I'm a huge fan of that. I think that's the foundation of us growing as a person. If we never take a moment to reflect on our past actions, on how we show up in our world, on the growth we've had, on those challenges that thought were going to kill you. And now when you look back, you can see, when you pause and look back, you can start to pull the growth and the silver lining from them. If we never take that moment, then we're missing pivotal opportunities for change. Now, commonly, when I talk about taking this moment of reflection and taking this moment of, look at the timing is great here because we're going into December. So when I talk about taking this moment of reflection and taking this moment to create space for yourself to look back on the last year, to look at things, I'm usually talking about it around New Year's, right? I'm usually talking about it at the end of December when I'm like, we're moving into a new year, because we all think about that piece of a new year as a new opportunity for change and blah, 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 blah. Well, if this is what you're using your concussionversary for, then that I support. Now, I have a client. He's inspired. He's so inspiring. So I have a client. His name is Jason. You've seen me share about him on my social media. He's a spinal cord client. Okay. He's a spinal cord client. And when I first met Jason several years ago now, and he came to the clinic, he had just been discharged from GF Strong, which is our rehab hospital in British Columbia. And at that point in time, he could not stand independently. He was doing some walking with a two-wheeled walker. It was messy looking, and he knows I say this, but he couldn't stand independently, which means he couldn't balance, which means he wasn't walking very far. He was in all these other pieces. And when I had said to Jason, I said, "What are your goals?" He looked at me and said, "I want to ride a two-wheeled bike again." And I was like, okay, let's talk about what we need to achieve to be able to ride a two-wheeled bike. And I said, an adapted two-wheel bike or a two-wheel bike? He's like, a two-wheel bike. And I said, okay, different goals, right? Nothing wrong with either one. Riding an adapted two-wheel bike or an adapted bike might be a stepping stone to being on a two-wheel bike. In his case, it was a trike was the stepping stone to the bike. And some adapted biking for mountain bike was the step to the bike. Anyways, so this was kind of like the first year. He was like, I want to do this. And I was like, okay, that's our vision. That's what we're aspiring to. Here's the pieces I would say we need to achieve to get us on the path to that goal. It's not going to be easy. There's probably going to be some backward steps and some headaches and some ups and downs. But are you cool with this? And he was like, I'm on board. And then his anniversary of his accident rolled around. And he was like, it's the anniversary of my accident. And I was like, oh, is this something you celebrate? And he was like, I do. He's like, I call it my alive day. And I was like, this is cool. What does that mean? And he could explain this so much better than I can. But basically, so much could have happened in his accident, probably like yours, right? Depending on how you got your concussions, whether it was sport, whether it was a car accident, whether it was trauma related, whether it was work related, however it is. For him, he broke his neck in his accident, right? He was an incomplete cervical spine injury. He could have lost a lot more. And he's like, so for me, I call it my alive day. And on alive day, every year, he picks a new activity to do. Something he hasn't done yet. Something to celebrate his being alive, to celebrate the progress he's made and how far he's come from the day of the initial accident. So if I'm remembering correctly, one alive day was walking on the beach with poles. Another alive day was his first time snowboarding, using adaptive snowboarding. I do not remember last year's alive day. But this year, if you watched my stories last week, he now is able to ride a two-wheeled mountain e-bike. But our goal was that he was able to get on that bike by himself, because up until last week, he needed someone to support the bike so he could get on. So we achieved that goal last week. The next goal is that he'll actually be able to start on his own. So that's the goal we're still working towards. But his alive day this year is there is a trail that he used to ride prior to his accident. It's a beginner mountain bike trail. And him and his wife and his good friend, who is also a mountain biker, for his alive day this year, they're going to ride this trail. So if you are somebody, and then they're going to go out and celebrate after, because that's what they do. If you are somebody who recognizes and acknowledges your concussion anniversary, your concussiversary, whatever you want to call it, I'm going to ask you to kind of take a step back for a second and look at how you think about that day. Are you the person that thinks about that day as this is when my life changed in a really negative way? Do you go down the pessimism, victim mentality, sorry to say it, victim mentality mindset of how everything changed in a really negative way and you don't see anything good? If that's the way you're acknowledging this, please stop. Instead, look at it as a point of reflection. So acknowledge the day if that's something that you're already doing or something you choose to do. You do not have to, by the way. But if you're someone who is already doing this, I want to encourage you to maybe just think of it a little differently. And if it's a concussiversary, use a moment and give yourself some space to do some reflection. Look at how far you've come in the last year. And looking at how far you've come doesn't just need to be function. What do I mean by that? It doesn't just need to be, I can do more things. I can participate more. That's one way. But how far you've come can also be, what is the relationship I have with myself? Am I more calm with myself? Am I more patient with myself? Do I love myself more? It can be, do I speak to myself more kindly? Right? Let's look at the quality of the relationships in our life. And maybe your circle has gotten smaller, but is there a stronger and deeper connection in the circle that you have today? Maybe that growth is the acknowledgement of where you are. And in that last year, you were able to acknowledge where you are and move through anger and grief into acceptance, knowing that acceptance doesn't mean you're going to stay where you are. Acceptance means I accept what has happened and where I am, and I'm ready to keep moving forward. So when you're giving yourself that moment of pause, or you're giving yourself that moment of reflection, don't just reflect on function, because there is so much more to you and the changes and the growth you can experience besides just what you can do. And then I would consider taking a card out of Jason's playbook. Jason uses his Alive Day to try something new, something that he believes in his heart of hearts and knows that because of the growth he's had in the last year, he will have success in this new thing, whatever it is. He knows because of the steps he's taken in the last year and the commitment he's made to himself in the last year that this new thing, yeah, it might feel a little scary. There absolutely might be butterflies in his stomach and nerves. But he knows that because of everything he's done in the last year and the support he has with him in that moment, that he will succeed in this Alive Day activity. And so maybe we take a card out of Jason's playbook and we use our concussiversaries to create your own Alive Day and your own new thing and a new way to celebrate you and the distance you and the change you have come in the last year. This is also kind of the same conversation we're going to have at the end of December, I'm not going to lie, because this is the way I look at reflecting back. But I also think these are not examples of things we should just be doing yearly. Do you set time aside for yourself every month to reflect back? What about each week? Do you have a journal prompt that at the end of each week you kind of sit there and look back and be like, what worked well for me this week? What didn't work well for me this week? How did I show up for myself and the people around me this week? Did I like who I was this week? There's some weeks I don't. I'm like, oh, this week was a stressful one. And I'm like, I just need some space. And then there's other weeks that I'm like, oh, this was, yeah. Or it's like, here's a lesson I learned about myself. Here's this recognition of this huge shift. You guys, I had my own. I'm not going to go into super detail, but in the last couple of weeks, there was this moment of a huge shift in my own mindset about something in my own personal life. I was like, and the second that mindset shift happened and I noticed it and I acknowledged it, holy Dinah, did my shoulders relax and did my stress levels go down and did it allow me to participate in certain aspects of my life with so much more ease. But it's because I acknowledged it and I became aware of it. If we never create the space to have these reflection periods to acknowledge the shifts in ourselves, we don't get these other really beautiful moments of like, oh, frick, that's awesome. So this was a hodgepodge episode for you. If you are a clinician listening to this and you haven't checked out the show notes to check out the new workshop, which I know you're going to love, do that. Okay? It's going to be fantastic. If you are a clinician, maybe someone here in journey, just remember again, save those stories for yourself. Like, go have fun with your team. Brainstorm, think outside the box, be creative. And if you are an individual who acknowledges and celebrates a concussiversary, or you're a clinician that your client shares with you, it's their concussion anniversary or their concussiversary, I would encourage you as the clinician to have the conversation with them that we just had here on this podcast episode. Digging into a little bit about what is that concussiversary, this is now my new term, guys. What does that mean to them? Because it provides a beautiful opportunity to redirect, to coach through mindset, to set on a new path. All right, my friends, I hope you are having an amazing week. We will be back next week, but until then, we'll chat soon. That's today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you liked what you heard, give us a like, give us a share, give us a tag on Instagram, and please never hesitate to reach out. We love communicating and connecting with you. Until next week, my friends, have a marvelous day.